Hi, and welcome to the third episode of Melon Heavy Horror. I'm your host with the Creepy Cans, Nikki, and this week I'm bringing you something a little extra special. I am going to review the 2012 movie The Cabin in the Woods from an actual cabin in the woods. So let's get this party started. The Cabin in the Woods was the brainchild of the duo Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard. And you may remember them as having worked on the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as well as its spin-off series Angel. So a lot of what I was watching in high school. I feel that The Cabin in the Woods is a must-see for any horror fan because they do a really great job of blurring the line between paying homage to their favorite horror films and also completely ragging on them. Throughout the movie, you see a lot of tropes. Actually, you see just about every trope imaginable as the filmmakers explore questions like what Goddard mentioned in his interview with IndieWire. Why does society feel the need to objectify and destroy youth? I think that's a really interesting question, and it's one that a lot of modern horror filmmakers like to explore. For example, the 2014 movie It Follows, I feel like that movie also really demonstrates this well. It really shows that any enjoyment of your youth or any time you exercise any freedom or have fun, you're going to be met with terrible consequences. So it's almost as if being young and youthful is sometimes viewed as a sin in and of itself. The Cabin in the Woods opens with two veteran actors. We have Richard Jenkins as Sitterson, and then we have Bradley Whitford as Hadley. So we don't initially, in the first sequence, learn too much about what project they're working on there or, what type of facility it is. All we know is that there are similar facilities around the world and that whatever it is their mission is, it's imperative that they don't fail. We are then transported to a completely different opening sequence. It really does feel like somebody just flipped the channel on the TV.
I want a reality TV show.
You really get a sense for the role that each of the characters is going to play. So you have, of course, Dana, played by Kristen Connolly, who plays the studious and sort of more reserved girl, although there is the whole alluding to the affair with her professor, but we don't get too far into that. We also are introduced to Jules, who's played by Anna Hutchinson. Jules, of course, her big reveal being that she's gone blonde, which will actually come up later in the movie. So that's kind of an interesting little opening zinger there, that she's just made this random decision to go blonde, which we can tell by Dana's reaction is not her norm. Also, we have Kurt, Jules' boyfriend, who's played by none other than Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth. So we really get a great introduction. Also, we meet Jesse Williams, who plays the character of Holden. So Marty definitely comes in and makes his impression as your stoner type, or the Shaggy of the group, if you will.
Oh my God. In the backseat, screaming out loud. In the backseat.
He rolls up right away in with his conspiracy theories. He also locks his car doors with the windows still down, which is apparently something that Goddard actually would do when he was in college. So just an interesting little personal Easter egg that he put into the movie. Now, let's talk about that coffee mug bong for just a moment. In the movie, Marty has an amazing collapsible, expanding coffee mug tumbler bong thing. It's really fantastic, and I've kept an eye out for one over the years to see if I could find one for sale, and I've never seen one. I have seen this website where supposedly they're available. However, they've never been there every time I've gone to actually purchase one. So big bummer there, but it's a cool on-screen prop. Actually, it's one that's going to come up a couple of different times, but if you ask me, that tumbler bong should have its own credit in the movie. Unfortunately, Marty does lose some stoner points pretty quick in the movie because he's rolling joints right with a big pile of ground up weed on a table in the back of a moving RV. I don't know anyone who would just leave all of that there because you're going to hit one bump and all of it's going to go flying. So he really should be using some sort of container, but I guess he's a stoner, so maybe he forgot it. The group is headed off to Kurt's cousin's cabin for the weekend, where they're planning to just basically get drunk and swim and relax and have a good time. Heaven forbid that they should have a good time. So then our crew finally does arrive at the cabin, and from the outside, needless to say, some of the characters aren't impressed. Jules even makes some jokes about sleeping in the Rambler. And so they do get inside, though, and once they're inside, it's way bigger on the inside than it looks like it is on the outside. I don't know if that was entirely intentional. The outside honestly looks like the cabin from Evil Dead, but on the inside, there's all these rooms and all this space, so I don't know if that was intentional or if I just think that's hilarious, but that was one thing that I noticed. It's at this point that we learn that Sitterson and Hadley have been orchestrating every move that the teenagers make. For example, the hair dye that Jules has applied is laced with something that's supposed to make her way more horny all the time and also a little bit more ditzy. So kind of a play off of that whole dumb blonde trope. While everyone is branching out throughout the house and exploring and claiming their rooms, we do have a really interesting scene where Holden and Dana have realized that there is a window between their two rooms, and we actually get one of my favorite one-liners from Marty. Marty comes in and he says, "Well, it was the pioneer days. People had to make their own interrogation rooms." And I just think that's really funny. Later, he'd also defend himself having made a ridiculous mix-up by saying, it's not my fault. I'm living in a womb of reefer, which I think is a pretty funny line as well. It could even be taken as a little bit of foreshadowing done for later in the movie as well, because it could almost be a meta reference. In the end, it does turn out that part of his smoking habits have actually helped him in this case. So his womb of reefer is being very protective, actually. Our crew plays a very drunken game of Truth or Dare, in which Jules does a really weird seduction scenario with a mounted wolf's head that happens to be on the cabin wall. Was a little creepy. At first, it was kind of sexy and cute. And then as she's literally making out with this wolf's head, you can notice that the taxidermied wolf's tongue moves a little bit as she's kissing it. And, it was just kind of a boner killer for me. But I would say that otherwise 10/10 on the seduction scale. That was really cute. Little Truth or Dare. At this point in the movie, the basement door flings open. We can assume at the work of Sitterson and Hadley, and Dana is dared to go into the basement. The whole crew actually winds up going into the basement, and what they find is really horrifying. It's full of every type of creepy prop you can imagine. We have a puzzle box like globe that definitely is reminiscent of Hellraiser. There's, your creepy music box playing a creepy tune. You have, a ghost doll. I mean, you name it. It's got every type of creepy trope in it. And it really starts to make sense at this point what Sitterson and Hadley had said in a previous scene, that what happens to the crew is of their own choosing. So you really get the idea that depending on what object they go with is going to affect what type of horrors await them. So by reading the Latin in the creepy redneck zombie torture family girl's journal, the crew has sealed their fate, and they will now face the zombie redneck torture family. Upstairs, we have some more antics, mostly in the part of Jules, who does a very, very sexy dance around the mantelpiece for the fire, and then she proceeds to really come on to both Holden and to Marty. And it's really kind of a weird, interesting sexual moment. Of course, that is shortly before she's ushered out into the woods by Kurt for some, I'm sure, just some Bible study time or something else really innocent like that. Yeah, let's go with that. We're given this really amazing sequence where Jules and Kurt venture deeper and deeper into the woods in search of their perfect place to basically to bang. At this point, we're about 40 minutes into the movie and we get to see our first pair of tits, and it's amazing and radiant. Sadly, this is a very short-lived scene because the team does succeed in orchestrating her death. She's actually very quickly taken down by the Papa Zombie. Nothing kills the mood faster than a bear trap to the back and a bandsaw across your stomach. Kurt barely makes it back to the cabin in one piece. He does get back just in time to outrun Papa Zombie. The remaining teenagers make the foolish decision to split up and try to barricade the rooms. Of course, their decision is influenced by Sitterson and Hadley, who subsequently also lock them in the rooms that they split up to go into. So they've really orchestrated the whole thing in this case. Now, it is at this point that we have our old friend, the hero, the expanding bong, does show back up and at least temporarily saves Marty's life. Now, we are led to believe that Marty is dragged off into the woods and murdered at this point. And, of course, we don't actually see him die, so we can't know for sure that he's dead. But that's what we're led to believe. Dana and Holden do manage to get together and drop into the black room in the basement. This is also where Dana gets a really particularly awesome kill scene. She murders one of the zombies with first a crowbar through the skull and then a knife that she stabs him with repeatedly until he dies. She really just sort of unleashes on him. It's kind of an awesome, girl let out your fury scene. At this point, Dana, Kurt, and Holden are making their escape in the Rambler, and you think that they're almost out of the woods, but you see them approaching a tunnel. We learn that the tunnel was supposed to have been blown up, and the demolition department says that they never got the order to blow it up. So I would assume that at the end of the movie, knowing that Marty's alive, I assume that it was him, but this is never confirmed. Kurt, at this point, really gives an inspirational and heroic speech about how he's going for help and he's going to send help for Dana and for Holden. It's this big, crazy speech that he gives, and the movie makes a really quick work of giving him an unceremonious death. Just like the eagle earlier in the movie, Kurt rides his dirt bike trying to make the jump across this giant canyon, smacks into this electrified invisible fence, and tumbles all the way down. I particularly loved the effect of the sparks flying every dozen feet or so as he re-hits the side of this electrified wall. It's really just a kind of interesting scene. You're riding that high of his emotional speech, and then boom, right into the side of this mountain, or this electrified fence. So it's kind of a funny scene. Though they're very shaken by Kurt's sudden death, Holden and Dana are resolved that they must make it out alive. And so they're making their way in the Rambler, and this is cut short because one of the redneck zombies has hidden in the back of the Rambler and has now murdered Holden through the throat with a large knife. This obviously causes the Rambler to crash, where it careens into the lake, and the impact floods the Rambler with water. Dana barely makes it out through the top hatch of the Rambler, we think leaving the zombie inside to go down with the ship. She then lays upon the dock, and take some deep breath. The movie takes a really interesting turn at this point when the red phone rings, and we can tell by the look on Sitterson's face that this isn't going to be good. So we then learn from the director on the phone that Marty isn't dead. So his death was alluded to, but he officially was not killed. Their entire evil plot to save the world has been foiled. I have a point. A question at this point. Now, throughout the movie, each time one of them dies, the mechanism to appease the gods is released and a bowl is flooded with blood. Up until this point, I had made the assumption that the blood being fed to the gods was the blood of the victim that they've somehow collected. If Marty isn't dead, what blood was being released? So it must not be the blood of the person that actually was killed. So who are they getting that blood from, and why wasn't the blood that they released enough to appease these gods? Why did they need all this suffering? I'm probably thinking way too hard about it. But yeah, that's just a question that I had there. So back to our heroes. Marty whisks Dana down a really creepy shaft, actually the one that the zombies came out of at the beginning of the movie. And this is our first glimpse of the two storylines really having characters mesh. Marty and Dana go into this really industrial looking tunnel where Marty explains that he thinks he can override an elevator. Even though there's no buttons in the elevator, he thinks he can override it to work and take them down. This scene is the reason why I have to wonder if Marty had some hand in dismantling the communications, which is why the path to get out through the tunnel wasn't blown. But again, nothing's ever touched on. It's just my own theory that Marty was involved in that somehow. The two descend in the elevator, which is one of my favorite shots because of how simple it is. We have the stark contrast of these two dirty, grimy, blood-covered, injured individuals in the white, overly lit, sanitary-feeling elevator, and it's really just a great shot. Marty descend further into the facility, and they begin to pass every horror known to man. First, they pass the werewolf guy, and then they pass a vapory demon ghost. We also get a very toothy ballerina demon as well, who is particularly creepy. Finally, they come face to face with like the Great Value brand Hellraiser, and Dana notices the puzzle sphere that he is holding, and she realizes that she recognizes it from the basement earlier in the movie. So it begins to be clear to her that they've really been orchestrated throughout this whole weekend, and that they really picked their own fate, but they had specific options that were there.
They made us choose. They made us choose how we die.
Once Sitterson and Hadley realize which pod Dana and Marty are in, they have them extracted by one lone guy with a handgun. I don't know about you, but if the end of the world were reliant on me retrieving this one person out of this elevator, I wouldn't just send one guy with a handgun. I'd send a whole squad of guys, and we know that they've got them on hand because they're about to be released in the next scene. And so why they didn't just send the whole squad together, I don't know. They sent just the one guy. At this point, Dana and Marty have made their way into the safety of a security booth that looks like it's sort of in the middle of a bank of these elevators. And so they are kind of holed up in here, and Dana realizes that there's a button to release all of the horrors. She does use a line that is brought back from earlier in the movie where she says, "Let's get this party started." And I think it's a really great head nod here. Now, there are also several things in this scene that really made me ask what the fuck. So one question is, why do you need a button to release all of the evil, horrible things at once? What scenario could you need to release all of them at once? My second question is, Why would the button to release all of the horrors at once be in a security booth that looks like the type of place they ask you to stop and sign in before you go into the courthouse? And seriously, just going back to that button, why do you have a button that releases all of them at once, and why is it so easy? Why would you want them released directly into a hallway that is clearly used by staff as well? So just a lot of questions here, but it does make for one really great scene.
Oh, shit.
An army of horrors is released on the squadron of military guys in the complex, and Dana and Marty stay in the safety of the security booth and watch it all go down until the windows are completely covered in blood and they can no longer watch. But we do have tons of head nods to other horror movies in this moment. One of the ones that I actually really loved, my personal favorite, is the little robotic scorpion with the saw blade on the tail. I thought that was really fun. Just the little zing of his saw blades, kind of cute. But let's go over some other highlights of this moment. So some of the other things that I really loved were the unicorn impaling the guy and the little magical tones they played when the unicorn impaled him. I thought that was really cute and kind of an interesting way to do that. Also, I really love the moment when Hadley got to meet his merman finally, and the merman is really ugly and grotesque, and it's kind of awesome. But it brings back to earlier in the movie when Sitterson said, "Oh yeah, they're cool, but the cleanup on those is ridiculous." When it devours Hadley, he does wind up turning into a fine red mist that's sprayed out of the merman's blowhole.
Oh, come on.
Super gross. Dana and Marty then make their escape through the facility, somehow warding off these creatures as they go, until Dana and Marty run into Sitterson in a hallway. Literally, Dana runs into him with a big knife, and right before he dies, he mutters a really cryptic message that she needs to kill Marty. And then, Sitterson now is no more. That's the last of all these government people we've been seeing the whole movie, and Marty and Dana continue on with their escape. Dana and Marty eventually emerge onto this large ceremonial platform where it begins to make sense that they've all been playing a part in this crazy production. You have, for example, the fool, the athlete, the scholar, the amorous woman, to put it nicely, and then the virgin stereotype. So it really begins to be clear to Marty and Dana that they were just filling a role. It's kind of an interesting moment of reflection. It's at this point that we get our first glimpse of the giant undulating horror that lies beneath the platform and threatens all of mankind if they're released. It is a really Lovecraftian moment. The way the what I assume is like flesh or tentacles or something just kind of undulates under the platform and seems giant. It's just a really intense moment. Sigourney Weaver then descends the platform and joins Marty and Dana, where she urges Dana that she has to kill Marty for the good of the entire world. I really think the dialogue here is very interesting. At this point, it is a very stark conversation about themes that we see in a lot of horror movies. It's this theme of youth being punished simply for being youthful. And we quickly explore the question of why does the world, and then in turn Hollywood, have such a hard-on for punishing the youth for being young? While Weaver explains why Marty must die, Dana begins to agree with her. She begins to raise the gun at Marty, and she seems like she might actually shoot him. It's at this point that Marty makes a very philosophical point that if their suffering and death is what's needed to placate these gods to keep them alive, then maybe humanity is not worth saving after all. Our old pal, the Wolfman, saves Marty's life by attacking Dana from behind while she's got the gun pointed at Marty. He leaves Dana what seems to be mortally wounded on the stairs, and the Wolfman then turns towards Marty and the director. At this point, the youngest zombie, whose diary kind of set this whole sequence of events in motion, comes down the stairs and is sent after the director. So the director and the youngest zombie tumbled down into the abyss. So in the end, she winds up kind of helping save the day a little bit. The objective has officially failed, and the Virgin has not been sacrificed by dawn. So the earth begins to crumble in around them, and Marty and Dana curl up on the steps to share a joint here at the end of the world.
I'm sorry I let you get attacked by a werewolf and then into the world.
The end comes when a giant lava god hand comes out of the earth and sprawls into the sky, and that's kind of the end of our movie. One interesting thing about the movie to me is it kind of feels like it's set up in scales, if that makes sense. First, you have the really close, personal feeling of the young people in the cabin. It's a very small scale, and it's just a few people affected. Going underground, you have the larger network of the industrial complex with the worldwide network of people who are keeping everything running by having these horrible things happen every year. So interesting there, keeps on spinning. And then finally you zoom out again and you have the planet-wide hysteria of the demolition of everything because these gods have not been appeased. So it seems like you get it in stages, and we keep zooming farther out, taking a larger look at different genres. It's just kind of an interesting stepped way to approach it, I felt like. I really loved The Cabin in the Woods because it feels like one of those movies that you can watch over and over again. I know personally I've seen it several times. I feel like every time I watch it, there's some kind of new Easter egg, something I didn't see before, and a new little plot device that maybe I didn't pick up on at first. And I really love that. You know, it feels like you can watch the movie over and over and you're never going to get tired of it. The other thing that I really love about this movie is it has a feel like it was a movie made for movie industry people, but the comedy and the concepts in it are still accessible by, you know, everyday normal people like me. So it just feels like an all-around great movie. I can watch it over and over again, and I hope that you will watch it too and that you enjoy it. So thank you for tuning in to another edition of Melon Heavy Horror. As always, I am your host with the Creepy Cans, Nikki, and each week I'll be bringing you a new review of a movie or a toy, comic, video game, you name it, and so we will discuss those here on my channel. You can always haunt me on social media by following me on Twitter or looking me up on Instagram. And either way, I would love to hear from you.